Okay, the recording is started. Matt, take it away.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining this month's Mainframe Security No Fail Friday webcast. My name is Matthew Dubey, Product Marketing for the Mainframe Security Solutions here at CA. And today our topic is around discovering sensitive data at rest and in motion with one of our newest products, CA Data Content Discovery. Giving our presentation today is the Data Content Discovery Product Manager, Chip Mason. And with that, I'll hand it over to you, Chip.
Good morning. Thanks, Matt. Good afternoon and good morning to everyone. I also will be joined by Sai Guja, our architect on DCD. She'll be helping to do the demo in just a little while. So let's get started with our presentation today. Just a bit of a disclaimer. This is for informational purposes only. There'll be a few items in here. They'll be forward-looking and talking about the future of our products. We can't obviously guarantee when any of this will be delivered, but we thought it's important to bring you up to speed with some of our directions going forward. So one of the things that we want to talk about here today is reducing the likelihood of having catastrophic data breaches in the data center. Now, some of this complements what many of you are already doing with our identity and access management capabilities on the mainframe. But the situation still remains that most of the data that is used in most of running our business today is really transacted on the mainframe. And sensitive and regulated data is stored on this mainframe. The risk is that some of this data might be orphaned. It might be disclosed by an employee with nefarious reasons for doing so. Some of this may be an intentional leak of this data via breach or some other kind of activity, or some of it might be intentional. What's really broken is that, we take this data and finding this data is very difficult. Most or many customers have homegrown capabilities or homegrown methodologies by which they either identify or tag some of this data. Many have some basic reports that they do and they run every night but don't even bother to look at. So the solution here really is to help improve compliance by locating data that is orphaned, forgot about, hidden, or unprotected, and that may be regulated or at least sensitive. So scanning and classifying this data really should remain on the mainframe, so that you don't introduce additional risk by moving that data. Now, when we talk to our clients about this particular problem, we frequently hear from CISOs that they know where all the data is. It's in our data center, right? We know it's there, and therefore it's protected because it's in the data center. And this is what we hear often. Sometimes from our security directors, we hear things such as the mainframe really is just another platform. It's just like all others in the network. It's attached via TCP/IP, and many aren't really sure what the data is that's there. They usually know it's very important and likely very sensitive, but they're not really sure what's there or what kind of data is there. They also know, at least many auditors do, that the mainframe really is not isolated anymore. It's not separated on the network. They don't really know how much unmanaged regulated data is there. They're not really sure much about it. But they know that with TCP/IP and USS and other things like that, that the data is fluid. It's moving around all over the place, on and off the mainframe for that matter. So we hear this a lot. We also know that there are a number of myths about the mainframe in general. So, for example, we often hear that the mainframe has never been hacked, and so it's locked down, it's no issues. But one thing to consider is that a growing risk these days, and a lot of what you hear in the news is that there are social engineering hacks that go after some of the fallacies us humans have in trusting others. And there's also, human errors where they send the data to the wrong email address or some other thing. They get duped by some of these social media attacks. Or, in fact, it may be just an insider threat, someone trying to make an additional set of income. In fact, Gartner has a term for this now. They've seen it so much and they hear so much from their customers. They actually have a term for people who take sensitive data and sell it on the dark net. They call them second streamers. And what that really means is that they are people looking for a second stream of income. So this is now so prevalent that Gartner actually has a term for it. So there you go. There's also the myth that mainframe data stays safe on the mainframe, right? But in fact, this data is very fluid. We have a world now where we have mobile apps that are accessing this data on the mainframe. We have mainframe data going into Hoop and other big data databases, so it's all over the place. But mainframe also, we feel, is really, covered under these 3 lines of risk control: operational, compliance, and internal audit. And that's likely and very hopefully the case, but often in many of our IT shops, mainframe is really viewed as a black box. This often leads to complacency, where you have strict rules on many other devices, Windows and Linux and whatnot, but no such rules exist for the mainframe. And this is an area where we actually are looking at focusing. Now, nobody can deny that the impact of data threat isn't real. I mean, probably every one of us has had a credit card been reissued to us, which is always a pain. I'm sure, like me, I had 3 in a year, so this does happen. It happens in health insurance. It happens in the U.S. government. It happens in retail, e-commerce, et cetera. And some of the costs are mounting over $200 million or more. Record numbers. We're talking in the 70, 80, even 200-odd million records that we're finding being stolen. And these are just ongoing crises that doesn't seem to stop. Now, granted, many of these are happening through vulnerabilities and other things typically targeted at distributed systems. However, many of these are actually done through social engineering and insider threats. So we can't isolate this to a particular platform or blame this on substandards in security designed around certain platforms. This is one of the reasons that we created this new tool called CA Data Content Discovery, really to help our customers reduce the likelihood of a catastrophic data breach, recognizing, of course, that over 70% of the world's mission-critical data resides in transaction on the mainframe. We're really focusing on 3 primary solutions that DCD brings to the table. First is the ability to find regulated and sensitive data on the mainframe within the mainframe data stores. That includes data stores that may be flat files as well as databases. We also think you need to be able to classify the data that you find and classify it based on regulations or perhaps organizational sensitivity. And then finally, it's important to protect that data, to make sure that it remains on the ZOS platform and that we're aware of it when it begins to move. So the app economy that we're all facing really does create a risk of new catastrophic data compromise. And, this is something that we must really look out for. So CA DCD, or Data Content Discovery, is really addressing this on the 3 fronts I mentioned: find, classify, and protect. So in the find area, really what we do within the tool is to set up a scan where you target a particular data set, perhaps even a volume, if you wish to find a little more globally what kind of data is on that volume. You initiate the scan, and that scan can be initiated through clicking a button on the web UI or scheduling it through your workload manager. And then we provide that discover results to a security administrator or whoever is the target for that particular report. Once you review that, you review the compliant results, and then you can label that particular sensitive data. We have methodologies by which we'll actually automatically inform you of what kind of data we find, but then the internal auditor can actually provide compliance report from this tool based on the kind of data we found and who is able to access it. And then finally, we can protect by modifying our accesses based on our scan results, completing reports and informing others of these scan results, and also helping to confirm successful audits once you do these changes around typically industry regulations. So when we talk about find within content data discovery, we're actually a very broad-based and general tool for actually finding regulated and sensitive data. DCD supports over 10 different file types, and we're not limited just to databases. So for example, we have physical sequential capabilities, which includes accessing things like QSAM, BSAM, and BDAM. We also have PDS and PDSE. We can, of course, access DB2 tables, but we also have the ability to look at files within the USS area of the mainframe, including HFS and ZFS, and we also have VSAM support. We're currently working on adding additional methodologies to databases. Datacom and IMS are in our plans. And we're also adding an additional capability to look at data in motion, and that is for folks that are downloading data via FTP as well as Connect Direct. So this is a fairly comprehensive list of ways and methodologies by which we're finding different data types, and these continue to grow as we move through the program. Now, one of the things that we do with finding this data is looking at data in motion. Let me explain a little bit about this. This probably isn't anything new to anyone, but it's actually an interesting aspect that seems more and more common. You often have what we call here a malicious system programmer. It could be anyone that has privileged access to sensitive data. But in many of these cases, you have these internal insiders who have taken their access and they see that there's something like a payments database, and they're able to use something as simple as FTP and redirect that FTP download to, say, their own home, to maybe a server or hard drive they have in their own home. And then later they actually upload that data and offer it for sale on something like the darknet, which uses something like the Tor Onion router to hide their activity from anyone and to do it in a place that is typically difficult to find. So you're seeing more and more of this as more and more people are offering up data on the darknet. Now, what DCD can do here is to actually intervene. Initially, what DCD does is issue a report and eventually an alert through our compliance event manager, but alerting to the fact that there is some unusual behavior by someone who actually has these kind of permissions. As we move forward in the program, our goal is to actually provide the option for customers to actually stop things like FTP downloads as part of this activity. So this is what we mean by data in motion and doing FTP capabilities. Now let's move on to Classify. Now one of the strengths of DCD is we have a very large and deep set of what we call classifiers that are available out of the box. Classifiers are what our engine uses to actually determine whether or not a particular file or a file within a data set is something of concern. And so we have a number of these classifiers, over 80 of them. We have them grouped in things that might be easy to recognize, such as PCI or HIPAA, PHI, and PII. We also have the ability, the very simple wizard, to actually create your own custom classifiers. So if you have some industry-specific data or even some company-specific data that you'd like to maintain and make sure it doesn't leak, you can create your own custom classifier. Among the things we do within PCI are very broad names. We have the primary account number, cardholder name, expiration date, service code, the stripe data. We also have the CV or CID information, and we have pins and pin blocks and all those sorts of things to help you really determine whether you have the correct PCI data stored in a database. And we automatically will look for and search for these types of data within any particular file. Now, as far as PII data, we have a really broad range of things here. And this, by the way, is not limited just to U.S., but we also have a broad spectrum of capabilities out of the box for places within Europe and Asia as well to look for specific things such as driver's licenses within certain countries, passport codes within certain countries, et cetera. So we have everything from name, address, driver's license numbers, personal identification numbers, fingerprints, gender, state, country, even email addresses and IP addresses here, which can be used to identify a particular user. So there's a very broad range of these. Many of these are you just pull down from the drop-down box. Others, of course, require you to go in and do a little bit of editing because there may be some additional fields that need some specification depending on your particular geography. So the very broad list of methodologies by which we classify PII data. We also have a broad list of PHI data, or personal health information, as it's called. So if you're in the U.S. and you fall under HIPAA, you'll recognize some of these things, looking for things like health plan beneficiary numbers, medical record numbers, biometric identifiers, things like that are provided out of the box, and make it easy for you to set up these scans to find out whether you actually do have this personal health identification information. So a very broad list of things, and these are growing every day. We continue to add these, and if you get onto our incremental program, you'll begin to benefit from these as we grow them and add them with every incremental release. Now finally, we have the ability to protect within data content discovery, so we can actually help you identify who has access to what data, and we can also identify who accessed that data recently. So you'll have more information than just knowing where your PII and sensitive data reside. You can also see who has the ability to access them through privileges granted by the ESMs, and you also figure out who has actually accessed this data and see if that's something that is normal or should be done for them. Here's an example of a screen that shows basically the fact that we are doing a scan based on ACFT2 to see who has access to a particular data set. And you can see the user ID, the username, and sort of their permissions. You can also then drill down to see when the last time they accessed this data. Now this is a screen of what our product shows, and I think to really get you an idea of that here in a moment, I'll introduce you to Sai, who will do us a demo. But real quick before I do that, I'll talk about a couple of integrations that we have in plan between DCD and our Compliance Event Manager. And one of them is to actually trigger some events when there's been activity. So when we find someone who is accessing data, we can actually trigger an event to be sent to say that a person is accessing a particular data set. We can also trigger a scan based on activity to make sure that we understand what kind of data it is they're accessing. So this is coming features that we will be supporting as we begin to integrate our Compliance Event Manager tool and our Data Content Discovery tool to give you access and information to where your sensitive data is, who's accessing it, and what are they doing with that data. It'll be very powerful capabilities. So some of the additional use cases that you can implement with this tool, for example, we've had customers who want to identify data sets that contain HR records that are lingering under HLQs of long-departed employees. A lot of them want to prevent or be aware of sensitive data that's transmitting out of the mainframe, particularly those that are crossing national boundaries, so the ability to identify an IP address and geolocate that and make you aware when information is leaving, for example, Germany, where they have strict laws for that. Also to alert and prevent a list of employee insurance information when someone's attempting to actually remove that information from the mainframe, or inspect data before transferring, before, say, a divestiture or an acquisition. When you're moving some data perhaps to a different location, up into a mainframe cloud, for example, it'd be very important to understand what kind of data you're moving prior to moving it, so that you can understand what your risks are and take additional measures to make sure you have the proper access, both where you're deriving that data from, as well as the destination. Also isolating all data sets containing customer banking details in a given volume, or locating instances of a broken macro in a source code library. So this is a more generic capability within our custom identifier section. So these are just some examples of the broad use cases that can be achieved within data content discovery. The product and the technology architecture is fairly simple. It lands very lightly. It's a very simple install. Installs in less than a day. It scans the data, identifies the vulnerabilities, and finds the risk and compliance across a very broad range of data sets and databases. So the classification engine will scan all of these databases based on workload, or if you command it to do so via the interface. It puts that information into a DCD repository. And then there's a web UI that controls all of this to allow you to control your scans, to create your scan sets, to target data sets, and also do all your reporting. We also have an API in here that we're using to work within our Compliance Event Manager tool. And of course, we're using this API as we move forward with other third parties. But essentially, it's a very lightweight tool. It is Java-based. It runs on your zip or ZAP processors. So it reduces your cost of running those scans because we actually talk to those custom processors as opposed to running MIPS on your machine. So it makes it for a very useful and very effectively lightweight tool for doing some very important capabilities for your mainframe data. Now, I'm going to turn this over to Sai Guja, who is our architect within DCD. We think that given the interface and the capabilities of the tool, showing a demo is probably a real effective way for you to get an understanding of what DCD does and how it works. So, Sai, I'm going to turn it over to you. And Lynn, if you could pass the baton, I'd appreciate it.
Already passed.
Thank you very much. Sai, over to you.
Sai, if you're speaking, we can't hear you, so you might need to hit #6 to unmute your line.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Chip. Good morning, everybody. So if you can see my screen, I just logged into CA's data content discovery that we call DCD, which I'll be referring as DCD going forward. This is the landing page, and all you see here in the landing page are the list of scans that have been performed so far. So in the landing page, you see the name of the scan and what the status is, and also the progress of the scan. So one of the scans you see here is cancel. So you can see if the scan is in progress or cancel or is complete. So I'm going to show you a scan and explain the details of it and what you see. So once you click the scan, you can see the scan details, and the scan details will contain what classifiers were used to scan this data against and what was the actual data that we scanned, and if we were including anything or excluding any data sets. And I'll show you in a minute how to create a scan which will explain all these details in breadth. And under this, you see what are the data sets that have been scanned with what classifiers and how many rows were scanned and what were the rows that had matches in it. And it has a link to the page which will actually show you what row ID had what classifier in it. We did not store any data or display any data that is associated with the match, but we do display the row ID so you can go. And then the other thing I want to show you is, like Chip mentioned, we do show who has access to the data that has been scanned and who accessed that data. So when you click on the access report icon, you see who has access to the data. And in here, it shows who were the users that had access and what were the access levels they had. So you can see it went to ACF2, and it provided me the user ID and all the access levels they had. There's also an option to export this report into a CSV file. The next thing I want to show you is who accessed the data. So when you click on this icon, it will take you to a page where it shows you who accessed the data and how many times they accessed the data between the first access timestamp and the last access timestamp. There's an option to actually filter these with the date range and the access count, and also an option to export this as a CSV file. So these are the scan details of a particular scan. And I want to show you how you can create a scan using a simple scan wizard, which is very intuitive. The file types, of Chip mentioned, we have multiple file types. We have the CA Datacom, we have DB2, USS, including HFS and ZFS. We can do PDS, PDSC, and sequential. So we can go via volume or storage group or at a data set level. So for example, I'm going to pick a data set level, and I can do add. And you can add multiple types of data file types in here in a single scan. And you go next, and in here you can choose to exclude data sets. So we allow masking, so you could do dcd.asterisk as your include criteria, and in particular, if you want something that you want to exclude within that list, you could do dcd.test.ssn in your exclude list. When I go here, this is the thing I want to show you. We have over 100 classifiers out of the box that we provide to the users, including PII, PHI, PCI. And these are not limited to North America. We do have APJ and Europe EMEA PIIs. So under PII, you can see the national identification numbers that we support in North America. That includes SSN of Canada and of the U.S. and passport numbers. And we have multiple driver licenses that we support. And we have other things that we support which are corresponding to PII, which includes the email address, first name, IP address, and other stuff. And there are things in APJ that we support which are Australian driver license and identification numbers. So I just want to show you these are the various things that we support under different sections here for our classifiers. Other than these, you have an option to create your own classifier. And under custom classifier, you see that we have 3 classifiers here. These are the classifiers that we created prior to the demo, so we can show you that the custom classifier you created can be displayed here for you to choose from when you're creating your scan. In a minute, I'm going to show you custom classifiers and how you create a custom classifier. The custom classifiers, we use a simple regex to create them, and if you are an experienced user in regex, you could add your regular expression pattern here and add it to the database which, of DCD. Otherwise, you could use this simple tool here which will allow you to create a custom classifier without having minimal knowledge of regex. So if you choose a letter, it does that, and if you have a number that you want to choose in your pattern, you could do this. And I have a, let's say I have a delimiter, and I have a dash here. So my regex will be constructed here so the tool, DCD, can understand this and use this as a pattern to classify the data against. So once I choose this, I can add the regex and give it a name. And this will be saved into our database DCD repository. And once we go back to creating a scan, we can use this classifier as part of our scan. And the last step I want to show you, the steps are, you can either choose to have an alert sent to you right away with the scan, and once this is done, you give a name and description to your scan and review the details of the scan that you have just created. The option in the previous page where you see run scan immediately will allow you to run the scan. This box is checked, so this allows the scan to be run immediately. Otherwise, you can uncheck it. You can uncheck it, and it will actually save the scan, which will give you an option to schedule the scans in your schedulers. So those are the things about the scans that I want to talk about. And in custom classifiers, there's one more thing I want to show you is, other than creating custom classifiers, you can create compound classifiers. So when you have multiple scans that you want to run against a single row or file, so you want to run SSN and PC credit card information in the same thing, you can choose this compound classifier to create and/or option. The next thing I want to show you are the system settings option. You know that the data is huge and we go through a lot of data, and in here we have given users options to set record limits and match limits. So you can set record limits to say I want to scan the data, and I want to scan data only up to 100 records per data set, and that will limit the scan. And match limit is I want to scan the data only until I find 100 or so data set matches. So if I check this box and specify 100, then after I find 100 matches, it will the scan will be complete and report back to you. So this way you can limit the transactions. If you want to just quickly test something, and this is a good way to do the test to see what do you set up and how do you set the limits up so you're not breaking any other processors. And this is about the email alert. So you set up your SMTP host name and the originating email address and the SMTP port so you can receive alerts from DCD. So these are the details I want to show you that we have on a brief overview. And that's all I had. Chip, back to you.
Thanks, Sai. That was great. Let's wrap this up and do a quick summary of what we've learned about DCD. So it's a broad set of capabilities that really apply to a large number of folks within the security area within enterprise. So especially with finding it, where our CISOs and our mainframe security directors really can help them understand where their risks reside within the mainframe. And DCD is the first data pattern scanning capability that is uniquely native to the mainframe. 100% of what we do resides in the mainframe. We scan the data on the mainframe without moving it off the mainframe. With that, we can gain a quick and critical insight about the potential and, of course, the magnitude of exposure and risk that exists on the mainframe. So suddenly we can go from not really knowing what is on the mainframe or the big black box that sits there on the raised floor. You can go from not knowing anything to being very well informed of what data exists there, making sure that you have the appropriate policies in place and the appropriate controls in place, and being alerted when there are deviations from those. For CISOs, especially internal auditors and risk officers, the ability to classify this data is very helpful, particularly when you're in a highly regulated environment. So it's a simple and modern UI. It makes it very simple for anyone to use it. It's accessible over your internal web. It doesn't require you to learn green schemes or 3270 keyboard commands. It's very flexible scheduling. It's designed to work with both Z and a non-IBM Z personnel. So whether you have Z experience or not is sort of irrelevant here. And it works with whether you're doing your workload scheduler, so if you want to put this within your normal batch jobs and run it that way, or it can run on demand. You can actually use this to prove to auditors that the appropriate controls are in place and that you have the appropriate controls set for the data types based on the regulations. For security analysts and maybe data analysts, you can help offload or eliminate risky offloading capabilities, or at least making sure that you're aware of the data that you're moving and that you have the proper controls. So only the data security product that really on the market that is for mainframe use and that uses these specialty engines to help reduce your costs in actually running and doing these scans. This allows you to stay in control. You can eliminate risk while reducing cost of the data protection process on the mainframe for the mainframe. Now, don't take our word for it. We have a customer here who has really said that really anyone, banking, insurance, or anyone with a large volumes of data would find this product to be especially valuable as the amount of sensitive and regulated data far surpasses what can be manually reviewed. Now, of course, our customer's name isn't Don, and he is a Fortune 200 company. We're not allowed to give out what company is from. And I suspect that this is normal for many of our listeners here, where those in security roles and in large companies really are reticent to give their information out. However, many of these companies will take a personal phone call to actually give you some information about their experience with their CA product. So if you'd like to follow up with any of us here on the call today or your CA rep, I'd be happy to get you in touch on a personal one-to-one call with any of our customers to help you give you some background information of their experience with this product. That's something I encourage you to do today. I'm going to end the presentation here, and that's what we had to present about data content discovery. I'm going to hand it back over to Matt, who's going to give you some information about some of the future No-Fail Fridays and some additional information. So Matt, handing it back over to you.
Thank you, Chip, and thank you, Sai, for that great DCD presentation and demo. I just wanted you all to see our calendar for our monthly mainframe security events and webcasts, and in particular, next month we have our second annual Mainframe Virtual Summit. So security is going to have a keynote at that event on defending your mainframe data, protecting your most sensitive mainframe assets, and that happens on July 20th. So as you can see here, you can find full information about the event at events.informationweek.com/CA Mainframe Summit, and we look forward to seeing you there. So Lynn, are there any questions?
There aren't any questions in the queue, so I think we can wrap up. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a great Friday.